around, he will eat the pizza. It's not on his diet. So, yeah, if you have leftovers, just try and dump those in the trash can where the little white dog can't get to. His name is Colin, by the way. I have a couple of things I want to share with you guys. First of all, this is the Edge office. We're a self-custody, multi-asset exchange platform where you can buy, sell, trade, stake, hodl, all of your favorite assets, including Coreum. We host meetups at least twice a month. So from all different kinds of topics. Our next meetup is on May 26th. It's a developer meetup, so I think it's going to be some sort of code along. That is a Sunday. It is Memorial Day, or Memorial Day weekend. If you want to know about our meetups, you can go to the Edge website, go to the events tab, and then you can see all of the meetups on there. Yeah. They're pretty fun. We normally have food and drink. So, speaking of food and drink, I want to shout out our sponsors. Edge is one of the sponsors. We provide the venue. BitRefill is one of our main sponsors. BitRefill is a pretty cool company where you can spend your crypto and buy gift cards, so you can actually use your crypto to live. And we use their DoorDash gift card to provide pizza and beverages for our meetups. So that's a pretty great sponsor of ours. And the last one is Coinstructive. Chris is not here tonight. He's actually in DC fighting for our regulatory rights as crypto users. So shout out to Chris in DC. What Coinstructive does is they're like a crypto private investigation firm. So if you or somebody you know has any issues with scams, call Chris and his team of experts will help you kind of track down what happened and maybe get it back for you. Maybe. Don't quote me on that. I don't know. We are live on YouTube here shortly. Okay, we're live on YouTube right now. So people on YouTube can only hear what goes into the microphones. So we're going to do a Q&A at the end. Just wait until I get to you with the microphone, and then the people online will be able to hear what we have to say. Two more things. One, Edge has a premium support option. So you can always call into our support team and get help. However, if you sign up for the Edge Mint membership, it's $15 a month, and you can actually come into our office and chat with our support team and get hands-on support. It's a pretty cool feature. If you go to edge.app/mint, you can sign up. And then lastly, if anyone signs up for Edge tonight who has never had an Edge account before, come find me at the end of the night and I will send you $5 in Bitcoin. So, yeah, without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and welcome Christian, Paul, and Favio to the stage. And they're going to talk about crypto regulation and AI.
Green light, and I am oh, there we go. I'm starting to hear something. Even Joe back there can hear something. All right. Cool. All right, well, thanks everyone. Thanks for coming out to what admittedly kind of one of the more important topics in crypto, which I honestly kind of hate dealing with respect to regulation. Ideally, crypto kind of skirts past it, but it can't, right? We're living in a world of rules, laws, and governments. And so it's a pretty hot topic. And so brought in a couple people here, some of our recent partners in Coreum, Sologenic, and one of their partners, Anchain, to talk about this with some of the insights they have around regulation. I think most people think about regulation at the government level, but there's also other aspects of regulation, more like certifications, that could also be relevant into the future. And so with us today are Christian from Anchain and Favio from Sologenic, which is the team that builds Coreum. Correct me if I'm wrong, as far as like the interplay between Coreum and Sologenic, but I'll let them introduce themselves, first and foremost. So Chris, if you want to kick it off.
Yeah, definitely. Christian here, so I head partnerships at Anchain.ai. We're a leading Web3 security and risk management firm. The AI aspect is that we have patented AI models across our product suite, which allow for a range of efficiencies through our products.
Favio here from Coreum and Sologenic. Sologenic
They might be off.
Is this one on? Oh, let's see. Okay, perfect. So I was just saying, it's Fabio from Sologenic and Coreum. You good?
Yeah, you're good.
Basically, we have two projects. One of them, Coreum, is a layer 1 built on the Cosmos SDK, and from the ground up, we had a very compliance-friendly vision in play, which aligns with our motto, which is like mass adoption will happen without institutions. Hence, we're partnering with firms like Anchain to ensure that we have the necessary tools, at least, to address the ever-changing regulatory frameworks. And yeah, Sologenic was the mother company, and it's still built on the XRP Ledger. It's an ecosystem as well. So yeah, happy to be here and share some insights.
Okay, cool. Thanks so much, guys. So I think I'm coming in. I want us to make sure our microphones are working before we continue on.
Try one more time, sorry.
Could you do a quick mic check one more time, Favio?
Mic check, mic check.
Oh, there we go. Okay, and
We're
Christian?
good now. Yes.
Mic check? Yeah.
All right.
Alright.
Okay, I think we're all live now.
Should we
Cool.
should we start from the top again, or are we
Start the
good?
stream again.
Sure, let's try to do a quick 30-second quick recap. So Christian, sorry for everyone on YouTube, we'll get that introduction segment right back. So go for it.
Yep. So head of partnerships at Anchain.ai. We're a leading Web3 security and risk management firm, leveraging AI models across our product suite.
Great. Fabio from Coreum here, a layer 1 built on the Cosmos SDK with a lot of compliance-friendly tooling and overall frameworks in place. So yeah, happy to be here as well.
Okay, cool. So we could dive into the topic of regulation on multiple different fronts. Start with what I think is probably top of mind for people with the recent news, and then dive into what I'd like to think is some of the technology that maybe you guys have built that could alleviate or make the crypto ecosystem much friendlier to the regulatory environment. But first, it's kind of like cover, like, heck, what are we running into in this regulatory space? And I know one of the things that's come across my plate and people have chatted about is like the recent public service announcement, the PSA that the FBI just recently put out, which has quite a handful of statements about warning people about using services that aren't properly licensed. And this happens to be a U.S. specific piece of regulation. This may apply to other countries by virtue of what the U.S. does, other countries do. What I'm most curious about, as far as your insights into this, are what was, in a way, the motivation, and how does this, what do you think is the motivation behind this PSA? Because it's not like we are busting any specific person, no one is in trouble, it's not reiterating any specific laws, but they put it out for a reason. What do you think could be the cause for the motive for that? And at the end of the day, what is the actual impact that it has on products, services, companies that are in the space?
Yep, definitely. So quick context, right? We work with many government agencies from across the globe. This includes like the United States SEC, the IRS CI, so it's the criminal investigation unit of the IRS, different law enforcement agencies, unfortunately not San Diego Police Department just yet, but those alike, and then as well as abroad, right? So I do have insight into not necessarily why they did it, right? Not direct conversation with them.
Opinions are allowed.
Yeah, but I mean, my insight just being in the industry. So for context, I've been in the industry for 7 years, but specifically working on cryptocurrency sort of security and risk management or regulation or compliance is another good word for 18 months. And a lot of the times victims cryptocurrency victims, those that have been prone to scams or hacking events, they actually reach out to us for help, right? They're hopeless, they don't know where to go. We usually always advise them, depending on the amount lost and the sophistication of what happened, to the FBI's IC3 website. This is essentially a website where you go and file a report to that of the FBI, essentially filing an FBI report, similar to that of a police report. The amount of reports that is probably sitting on their desk is probably alarming in terms of the amount of scams that is happening. Most of these scams are happening across Tinder, Bumble, different sort of dating sites, where these victims fall. They're prone to romance scams. For those that don't know what it is, it's essentially someone acting like someone that's looking for love or whatever it might be, ends up scamming the victim for their funds, their hard-earned money. When they send it, they run away, they're gone. The victim doesn't know who they were and what happened, right? So I believe that's one of the cases, okay. one of the main reasons. And then not including the amount of hacks that is happening on gambling websites, just different websites where cryptocurrency is used as a means of value or transaction.
I like that insight because I know a lot of people in the crypto industry just think it's an attack. Like there's no meaningful reason for the PSA other than to threaten operators of cryptocurrency services, where you give good insight in the sense that, okay, there is an actual risk in people using crypto for certain purposes, such as where they might be misled with scams.
Right.
I'd love to go into a little bit more detail as far as like what was kind of mentioned in there and how that could relate, or where that could be perceived as unrelated to scams, but the actual services themselves. But first, I'd like to hear your thoughts on this one, Favio, and maybe, I know you come more from the technology side, the chain level side, but what do you think the intent was for this, and do you think it might even affect companies that are building cryptocurrency protocols such as yourself?
Yeah, I definitely think the effect is negative in a sense that the perception of just overall crypto as an asset class is going to be a little bit more, taken with a more careful consideration. But at the same time, I think it's necessary because I do think this is a real problem, and that's the reason why a layer one like Coreum is partnering with companies like Anchain.ai, because we are the ones that really want to address these issues before they even get to the product side of things at a network level, at the protocol level. I definitely think also most of the people this statement was addressed to probably don't know much about how it works, and they just hear crypto and associate it to scams directly, right? There's scams using other sorts of technology as well. So I think it's only fair, just like Christian mentioned dating apps, right? So maybe they associate that with the scams as well now. So I think it's not like a threat in a way. It's just like warning.
So remembering that specific PSA, the one thing I recall is it warned users against using cryptocurrency services that were not licensed. And that was a key part that I said, well, okay, what exactly does that mean by a cryptocurrency service? And what might a user in the cryptocurrency world interpret that to be? Might they go so far as interpret that as being, okay, a chain is a service. It's providing some kind of service. Obviously an exchange, I think we all agree that's a service, is a piece of open source software, a service. That was one of the ambiguities that I had looking at the PSA. Scams could be interpreted as, hey, you're using something that isn't obviously licensed. You're maybe sending to an address. I know some scams look like a legitimate company, right? But it isn't licensed. What would be your interpretation of this warning from the viewpoint of don't use services that aren't properly licensed? I think they even might have mentioned MSB in that process. What would your take on that be? Like, what are they actually warning users against doing, and how might that get interpreted incorrectly?
Right. I think for a user, it's going to be very difficult to know whether something's licensed or not, right? As a user today, in just Web 2, non-Web 3, I don't know if a company has gone through SOC 1 or SOC 2, right? And these are things from an IT perspective that if I'm trusting them with my data, how do I know that it's not being shared? How do I know that they're properly sort of storing my data? So as a user, again, I think I personally wouldn't say that this is coming. They're essentially, putting out this PSA for the end retail user, but most likely entities like yourself, where you would interpret that in a sense of like, how can I build trust with my end consumers or the broader community from using my services or products?
Got it. I'll take Favio.
Yeah, I did take a look, and it left me with a lot of questions, like how do we become one of those, certified institutions, right? And I think there's a lack of more information for companies like the wallets, the exchanges, the user endpoints. I definitely think this announcement. I mean, I don't disagree with Christian, but I think it was lacking a lot of context in that front, right? I don't know how you can obtain it, or even if I tried searching, they have like a site where you can search which companies are registered under the MSB, I think it's called. Yeah. And I couldn't find any familiar ones, so I think it's a bit confusing, to be honest.
Do you think that was the intent? I mean, clearly, if it read like it was targeted to consumer, because it said prevent from using these specific kinds of services, which doesn't sound like a thing you would mention to a business. But do you think that there was an intention in that ambiguity? Because clearly, as a consumer, it's actually hard to find this information. How would one know? And therefore, maybe have you had any discussions with some of these regulators and government officials that might give you a clue as to why would they say these specific phrases and why so ambiguous?
Yeah, I've personally haven't spoken to these regulators, right, regarding this. My sort of just point of reference here is they're just casting a wide net, right, hoping to throw something very broad, ambiguous, as a form of deterrence. However, is that a good thing? Does that help the industry? Probably not. No. It creates more confusion than it does sort of a path forward for us to continue to innovate. But I see it more as a form of deterrence, for sure.
Got it. I think around that same time, we got hit with quite a handful of, I'll call it nuggets of what could be perceived as negative news. One of which were a couple of wallets in the space exiting the US. So obviously this is another topic of discussion with respect to the US, and maybe we can do a compare contrast US versus other parts of the world. I know a lot of operations for you guys at Sologenic are overseas. I think Dubai you had mentioned. And so the two wallets I recall were Wasabi, which I think had focused strongly on Bitcoin privacy, and another Phoenix, which was specifically Lightning. So they definitely had some unique functionality that you don't see across many other wallets. What do you think was kind of in their minds as far as the reason to exit the US, and maybe specifically what might have been unique about the US environment or certain regulations in the US environment that made it unfavorable for them such that they would be interested in exiting?
Definitely. I do believe that there's an intense enforcement action in the US. Where there's a lot of confusion still, right? It's a very gray area. We're seeing this from the top level of management from across different agencies, and due to that gray area, it sort of pushes people away, right? That is where our company is sort of doing our part in terms of creating educational materials to essentially certify staff members of Congress, staff members in DC. That way they can sort of be educated in terms of what is DeFi, what is Web3, what are smart contracts, what's the benefit of them, rather than focusing so much on the negative aspect of a smart contract. What are sort of, how is this going to help the integrity of our financial systems, our way of life. The list sort of goes on, right? All the benefits of Web3.
Right. So let's take the example. Let's say any one of the people in the audience, one of you guys, runs into someone in the political landscape, and they get into that discussion where you've got a senator who's like, DeFi, it's used for gambling and illicit activity, blah, blah, blah. What could you give people here, empower people here in the audience with a 1-minute response to that?
Oh, that's great. I think the biggest response is just look at what the Bitcoin ETF is doing. right? What is it doing for America? The amount of sort of volume that it's attracting. And then let's dive further into the whole, Bitcoin ethos and why Bitcoin? Why do we need Bitcoin? How can Bitcoin be used as a national security weapon, right? Or deterrence weapon, which is a whole sort of rabbit hole in itself. But I think sort of that would be my pitch. I know it's a little bit high level if we were to go down that rabbit hole. But yeah, that's sort of like what I would say. Hopefully the person I come across can understand that.
Okay. Favio, how would you respond to that type of debate if you were, I don't want to call it a debate, but that kind of communication exchange coming across someone on the government or regulatory side, showing the pro benefits of crypto and why to regulate it fairly? What's that argument where it's really easy to create rhetoric, like negative rhetoric around crypto. And so what type of positive rhetoric would you provide?
First of all, like the way we navigate these regulations is through always partners, right? So for example, whoever handles our fiat on ramps and the applications they are built on Coreum, they are the ones that usually send insights. And for example, I'm very aware of like Mika or Bara in Dubai. And what I would say, how the conversation should go to any government official, I would use an example of, the example of municipalities. Like, there are a lot of major offices in the U.S., and we've spoken to a few of them, that they want to get into Web3 as a way of doing crowdfunding initiatives to better their own cities, or tokenizing some, for example, carbon offset credits. It's like this new, I wouldn't call it products, but these new opportunities they have. So I would bring those up to more, as an example of how crypto can be used for good, right? So yeah, I think that's an example. The other one that when I've talked to lawyers or regulators, I always hear the example of also the tokenization of assets that are illiquid, right? So for example, commodities like gold and just opening up the market, right? Which there's a big opportunity, I think, specifically in the commodities, ETFs and stocks, securities space. But that's a delicate conversation, I understand, but I think it also is it's important. Yeah.
Okay. So from the viewpoint of, you'd mentioned you guys are working on projects that obviously can complement chains and provide more regulatory clarity or be a little bit friendlier. Maybe this is possible, maybe this isn't. Looking at those two projects that exited the US, if you were sitting across the table from the founders of those two projects, so one was Phoenix, which was a Lightning specific wallet, another one was Wasabi, which is a privacy focused Bitcoin wallet. Is there anything you could say that say, hey, we've got a product here, or just in our experience, here's what you could do to feel a bit safer about operating in this environment and possibly not have to leave? If the answer is, sorry, this is just a product clash, oil and water mix with the US, you made a good decision, that's fine. But is there something you feel like is in your kind of your toolbox to help companies like them?
Yep, it is. And essentially what we provide, right, one of our, so we provide a set of tools, right? We have a whole product suite for compliance officers or fraud departments, whatever it might be, specifically for the Web3 space. And, one of the biggest aspects is if you're building any sort of decentralized application, whether it's a decentralized exchange, an NFT marketplace, any sort of good, or any sort of marketplace or platform that allows for on-ramping and off-ramping of virtual assets. The first thing that for example, when I talk to sort of founders or CEOs is, what is your compliance structure? Do you have a compliance structure? If we start to merge digital assets with that of our existing financial system and just see it all as finance, how do you sort of safeguard your ecosystem or your platform from not allowing or deterring terrorist financing or illicit activity from happening? How do you prevent sort of money laundering from going into your ecosystem? Are you a pathway for that? So these are sort of questions that, as a founder, you should probably ask yourself if you're building anything. And if there is a big sort of hole that allows you to let these sort of illicit activities enter your ecosystem, then that's where essentially I would pinpoint and say this is something that we must fix.
Okay, so from the viewpoint of those two products, one actually has its focus on obscuring transactions. That was Wasabi.
Right.
I don't know that it had an on and off ramp, but let's assume it did. Would your company be one that effectively works with the on and off ramp?
We do.
And if you already did, would there then be a level of security provided to Wasabi to say, okay, we can continue operating within the US and not have to necessarily exit? Or is there some additional concern aside from the on and off ramp functionality? Because say they use an on and off ramp and that on and off ramp already worked with you guys.
Right.
Where does that leave them as a product independent of that?
Personally, I'm not too versed in terms of the actual infrastructure of Wasabi. Please correct me if I'm wrong, but to my understanding, it's sort of a mixer.
It was an integrated mixer into a self-custody wallet.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, the technology itself, I mean, the protocol is meant for to send sort of funds in a privacy-preserving manner.
Correct. Yes.
Right. So it's quite difficult to sort of, put compliance checks on solutions like this.
Mm-hmm.
The first thing that we would sort of do, so we're not doing KYC, right? We're not doing anything that has to do with like physical IDs or passports or
Okay.
physical identifications. What we're doing is all on-chain.
Just on-chain analytics.
On-chain analytics. We're just looking at your historical activity on-chain, sort of running checks across different sanctions lists from across different government sites, like counter-terrorist financing sites, whatever it might be, counterintelligence sites, so like FATF, OFAC, and we just want to make sure that you're not allowing, let's say, a known sanctioned actor from using your products or services. So we would run a check on that specific transaction either before it takes place or when they sign up for your service.
Got it. So from the viewpoint of obviously a service that's trying to mix the funds, that could be obviously a challenge.
Right.
From the viewpoint of a Lightning-specific product, which presents its own different challenges. I'm not sure how many people here have used a Lightning app wallet service. I see 1, 2, 3 hands, 4. What could those products do with respect to providing similar guarantees or assurances that they're not interacting with illicit funds and could Anchain provide that type of, not call it guarantees, but higher level of assurance?
Yep, definitely. So in that instance, right there, again, it really depends on the user experience. What does that workflow look like? How do you onboard a customer? Or a user?
Lightning, it's straightforward, right? You get your Lightning invoice, you send it to somebody, they send you funds.
Right.
And most work in that exact user experience.
It wouldn't necessarily work at the protocol level. Like let's say, for example, in this instance, the Lightning network.
Right.
There's no oversight to Lightning, if I'm not mistaken. There's probably I don't know, is there a Bitcoin DAO or that oversees Lightning?
There's not a DAO per se. It's protocol of channels, which admittedly do have onion routing, which encrypts the actual traffic going between them. Although most traffic does go through a few centralized hubs, and it's actually an open-ended question that I have is, how much of that traffic has been quote unquote figured out such that it can be traced under what conditions? So I know, general on-chain traffic for like Ethereum and Bitcoin, a lot of companies have gone and been able to track transactions pretty readily. I don't know about things like the Lightning Network, which are not focused on privacy, but just have a different way of operating. Whether or not companies like Anchain have actually figured out some subset of being able to determine source and destination of funds and whatnot.
Right.
And that's kind of my open-ended question. Has that been figured out? Or is that actually an area that hasn't been cracked yet for the people that want to add compliance? This will be a struggle. For the people that want privacy, it actually becomes a direction that they might head to. So that's an honest, open-ended question that I'd love to know the
definitely.
answer to.
In this instance, like and we are working with like entities that are using the Bitcoin Lightning Network, right?
Oh, you are? Okay.
Yeah, but again, it's going to be down to how does that customer journey look like, and at which given moment are they running a compliance check. So for example, if you're a wallet where you're onboarding new users, they're creating a profile on your system, now you're sort of associating an individual or an entity with a Bitcoin address to receive funds from that of the Lightning Network or whatever it might be. At that moment, we would essentially run a compliance check, right? Or advise, said entity to have a compliance structure there. And when it's receiving funds, right, usually the way that some of these products work is that they receive it in the pool, and then the pool sort of passes it on to its clients. At that moment, they can run a compliance check just to make sure that those funds aren't sort of illicit funds. So that can be one instance. From a protocol level, maybe I can pass this to Favio, where we are working with sort of foundations is for them to subsidize these sort of tooling kits or tools and promote it across their ecosystem, so that when developers are building products or services on, let's say, for example, Coreum, that way they can sort of come with a compliance first mindset, at least specifically, let's say, here in the US, where compliance is sort of a struggle and a very relevant topic. Most founders never prioritize sort of security or compliance, right? It goes either to marketing or product development, specifically in Web3, right? So that's where we're sort of working with leaders that are, at the foundational level, that understand, the complexity of compliance products and can promote that.
So from the viewpoint of what you guys are doing at Coreum, I know that you guys have a partnership with Anchain so that Coreum itself as a chain is being indexed and kind of searched for non-compliant transactions. You had mentioned, Christian, really being developer first, being forward to the developers as far as this kind of tooling. Anything along those lines available for someone developing on Coreum to make it easier for them to kind of follow some of these compliance checks in whatever jurisdiction they feel like
absolutely
fitting
I
in
think
to those rule sets?
in Coreum, we have a unique experience having worked on the Sologenic side of things with XRP, as you guys know, during the lawsuit period. So we really learned how to, from a product standpoint at least, know how to supervise from the design, even in a way that it's fully decentralized. So any Sologenic product, there's no one central party holding customer funds at any given point. So it's just the entry points like the fiat ramps. But to that point in Coreum, what we decided to do is to adhere to ongoing standards that are already out there. So one of them is ISO 222, which is it's basically what banks should adopt by the end of 2025. And this messaging standard, we implemented it on the blockchain in a way that anyone that's building on Coreum can easily be compatible with. So they can send the data, the messaging, and also the settlement on the same token. So we kind of tokenize the ISO 222 messages. So this is, for example, one of the features that we have, but of course, along with Anchain, we are adding a lot more tools, SDKs, that have these pre-built modules that can be helpful for. Maybe I'm just going a little bit on the tangent. It's not necessarily compliance, it's standards, but I think it's all interconnected, right? To just being able to provide a project that you can safely say it's adhering to certain regulatory frameworks by jurisdiction, right? So if, for example, even the travel rule, this is something else that you can, on Coreum, we're working on adhering into what we currently have transaction-wise.
You mentioned two things that I think the audience might not be so familiar with. One earlier was MiCA, and another one's a travel rule. Can you give some context and understanding as to exactly what those two things are and how they might apply to products that people use in the crypto space?
Right. I'll just give a high-level overview. I'm no expert on the subject, of course, but from my understanding, MiCA, M-I-C-A, is a framework that the European Union proposed, and the good things about it is it actually has some clear rules to follow, and that projects can easily integrate. The second thing is also that it works across the European Union, so it's kind of interoperable in a way. And the third one, I think it's one of the first actual documents that it's addressing crypto regulation in a very direct way. Like, it doesn't leave a lot of gray areas, I think. And then Dubai has its own thing, right? Like the UAE with VARA, which I'm honestly not too familiar with, but yeah, that's the status.
And that was Mika that you're referring to?
Yeah, Mika.
And maybe one of you can kind of extend on like the travel rule. Like, what exactly is that, and how is that either affecting us now or going forward?
Yeah, to my understanding, what the travel rule is verifying every transaction that's above $1,000, if I'm not mistaken, or $10,000, where similar to like our existing sort of the Web2 financial system, transactions above $10,000 must have they have to go through some sort of like SARS report, which stands for like suspicious activity reporting. Sort of banks have to follow this rule as money transmitters.
Got it.
So travel rule is something similar like that, to my understanding.
Got it. Do you know if that's applying to all cryptocurrency transactions? Because obviously by default, the cryptocurrency transaction needs an address. Are they looking to apply that to all of them, or maybe ones coming from more of a financial services company like an exchange? What's your insight knowledge as far as where that even applies?
I'm personally not quite sure. Yeah, so our company works with travel rule providers. So when they are sort of, doing that sense of procedure, that workflow, they're essentially calling our API and running a transaction check on the address to make sure that it is not sort of an illicit actor.
So maybe that can actually give us a bit of a hint. So as far as the entities that are using your service for the sake of travel rule compliance, have they trended to be more exchanges?
Yes.
Or have there been any like pure software companies that are using it as well?
So it's mainly exchanges.
Exchanges, okay. The custodial, I presume.
Right, on-ramps, off-ramps.
On-ramps, exactly.
And usually these entities have a compliance officer. They're a little bit more mature in terms of understanding this regulatory framework,
right.
As opposed to someone launching a gaming app or whatever it might be.
Some random Web3 NFT,
right?
degenning app. Got it. Okay. So let's kind of end on what hopefully is some of the good news in our world. We always see regulation as being, generally speaking, negative. I know, Favio, you gave some hint that, okay, at least Mika's clear. I'd like to open to any other part of the world, whether US, outside of the US, obviously Mika was part of Europe, of any form of regulation that's recently passed or been proposed that actually seems like is a net positive for crypto. Anything that comes to mind. If it's nothing, that wouldn't surprise me. And so okay, well, there you go. If there's any nugget that we can kind of cling on to and go, okay, look, this looks somewhat positive. What is that? And what clarity did it provide? What, ruling or positive outcome has come out of that? Anything from you guys?
Maybe someone can do a quick Google search here, but I believe the state of Oklahoma this week passed a law that sort of they're acknowledging the right to preserve and self-custody Bitcoin.
Nice, awesome.
So I believe definitely Wyoming is one of the most friendliest crypto states.
They were one of the worst early on, but now they are easily one of the friendliest.
Yeah, and the story goes with Wyoming. They're the first state to, I think they created the LLC structure.
Right, which is why many LLCs are based there, and you don't even have to have personal information tied to an LLC. It's almost like a KYC-free LLC.
Yeah, and I know it's sort of the legislature there and the staff, they want to take a lot of pride in doing that once again, but this time, LLC 2.0, which is being able to form DAOs, able to form. This is Oklahoma or Wyoming?
This is Wyoming. Oh, Wyoming. Okay, cool.
Yeah, and
So it's kind of on what hopefully is some of the good news in our world. We always see regulation as being, generally speaking, negative. I know, Favio, you gave some hint that, okay, at least Mika's clear.
This is Wyoming. But I do know like states like Texas are also passing some of these laws as well. Not quite sure about California. That's maybe something that we should look into.
Unfortunately, we just passed or are about to pass the version of the BIT license from New York, but now in California, which obviously is going to put a lot of headache on crypto financial services companies. I know that it hits the ATM market really hard. I really wish Chris was here, who would normally be moderating this panel. He has a lot of insight into the regulatory environment. But the last I heard from him, ATM operators are going to get hit really hard by it. But I know that there's been some pushback, and I think there's a vote getting put together to try to push back on some of the terms. But definitely not my area of expertise. Any nuggets of hope that you think have come across your side? Yeah, anything positive? I'd love to hear about the Oklahoma thing. That's actually news to me, so that's awesome to hear.
Yeah, I've seen like so many different things happening, right? For example, in the UK, there was a new cool-off period that you needed to kind of wait after you transferred funds over crypto. And that kind of defeated the whole purpose. So a lot of like ramps exited the UK for some time. I think it has changed now.
What's this cool-off period? Can you describe to people what
so
exactly is this thing that happened in the UK?
Basically, what I understood is like if you send crypto right from one party to another, once that party receives it, there's a period where they cannot move it.
That sounds like Bitcoin, where you got to wait like who knows how long or whatnot. And so, but I presume you're talking more about like maybe a financial services, like a you know, like a custodian.
This applies to, like I said, anyone that deals with fiat crypto or custodies the assets.
Ah, got it. Okay. So sorry, you were saying that as far as a cool-off period, I just wanted you to describe what it is, and then you were going to give some context on some aspect of improvement. I thought you were about to, then I interrupted you. So,
I mean, the UK did that, and at the same time, EU pushed MiCA. So it's kind of like,
okay.
Yeah, we saw a lot of companies moving more into EU.
So I've heard of MiCA. I don't know the details. Any nuggets from there that you think are positive? Like any specific clarity that, you know, a company might feel without that clarity they wouldn't want to operate, but now they have that and can operate. Any nugget out of MiCA that you recall?
Not really, but what I can share is, you know, I was at the Paris Blockchain Week event very recently, and there were a lot of regulators present in the event and doing talks about MiCA, about like they were willing to work together with a lot of firms in specifically France, and
okay.
There was a lot of positive sentiment as well. Yeah.
So they're at least showing up, which I don't know that they are not in mass in the U.S. A few, the ones that want to get elected, at least the elected officials are definitely showing up. So what would you say is from a consumer point of view, what are some of our best action items to ensure we have a better path forward, that we don't have so much of the bad news and more of the good news? What can we do? What can we support? Who can we support? Or just actions we can generally take?
I think we need to be involved in our democratic process and, you know, reach out to your state regulators, to those staff members sitting in sort of, you know, these different government agencies, and, you know, make sure that you're voting for the people that are sort of supporting the right crypto ethics, right? And that are supporting sort of the flourishing of the innovation of Web3. Because if we're not, then we're going to continue to allow boomers, you know, to take over and tell us, no, this is wrong, this is right, simply because of a lack of understanding, right? We're seeing it across not just Web3, but we're seeing it across social media platforms. We're seeing it across like autonomous vehicles. The list sort of goes on, right? And that's essentially what I believe sort of the bottleneck that is stopping from innovation in general to flourish.
So I know personally, I just struggle with figuring out who those people are, who to talk to. Are there any resources that you're aware of that would be good references for people? I know of one that I've come across, but I know there's several others. I've come across recently Stand With Crypto. But any that you're aware of that people can use as these references as far as, you know, who are the local legislators for where you live? What are the hot topics that are on the table right now? Any resources you're aware of?
Probably not. Yeah.
Do the research.
Yeah,
Figure
essentially.
out.
You know, find out who's like in your local election. Start there. Start from the local level and work your way up.
Okay. Anything from you, Favio? Any tips for the rest of us, even if it's not necessarily on the political side, just action items to help going forward to make crypto friendlier?
Yeah, I mean,
governments?
I think the regulation cannot necessarily be a bad thing, right? Like it kind of levels the playing field for some companies, especially managing such a risk, right? And trust is everything when it comes to the blockchain space, I think, right? Either you're trusting the actual technology, or you're trusting, for example, a custodian that is regulated and has the proof that he has the assets. So I just think having all of these options is good right now for projects like us, at least, right? Like because there's no specific framework perhaps for the US yet, but at least we have these tools, these options for people that are looking to deploy applications and actually get the licenses. And on the Sologenic side of things, we really want to bring RWAs in the most compliant way to the US market. So we are either looking for a partnership or acquiring a broker dealer in the US.
What's an RWA, by the way, for those that might not know the buzzword and terminology?
Well, I use RWAs, but I usually don't like to refer as real world assets, because like they can still be digital. But it encompasses anything from stocks, securities, or even carbon credits, or anything that is not native to the blockchain. We call RWA. And we've even seen like deep in technology engaging with like robots and tokenizing the activity of robots. So that's
Cool.
what we call RWA. Yeah.
All right, cool. Hopefully that was insightful for folks. And so happy to open up with any questions. We can kind of close out the night with, so feel free to fire away with anything for the panelists.
We're going to do some questions. I have
Yeah, so we'll pass the mic around so we can get
and
that
then
on the recording.
we're going to do a quick lightning round after that. One back here.
So on your last question about who you could go to find out more information, I was wondering if the people in Oklahoma, how did that go from, in Hawaii, how did it go from worst to best? Maybe there's some insights there.
Yep, definitely.
You know about Oklahoma. I was referring more to Wyoming. I know Wyoming was one of the, I don't know how it did. It's almost like I forgot about Wyoming. When I first got involved in crypto in 2014, they were like the one state like you couldn't send funds from. And then suddenly I think, Caitlin Long came out and she started building a bank, and before I knew it, it was like one of the friendliest. So I don't know the story of that. I just know that the beginning and the end. I'm not sure about Oklahoma.
Well, in Wyoming, I was actually
Okay,
present with like Caitlin Long and Cynthia Loomis.
Oh, nice.
I mean, I guess everything from when it comes to innovation is because something really terrible happened and we must fix the situation. I think in Wyoming, it was a big sort of coal economy, right? Coal started sort of dissipating. No one uses coal anymore. And they needed a new way to bring sort of, they need a new way to just stir up the economy again. And what a better way to sort of create policy that allows for entrepreneurs to come to your state, set up shop. At the very least, file an LLC in Wyoming and get those sort of credits or whatever cost they're spending to form an LLC there. And I think that's really where it started, if I'm not mistaken. And obviously having sort of pioneers like Cynthia Loomis or Caitlin Long that are pushing the industry forward, are being vocal about it, sitting in forums and panels, conferences, whatever it might be, and really bringing awareness to the issue there.
Very cool.
1, 2, 3. Sorry to bring back to like bad news kind of stuff after Paul tried to finish it with the positive vibes, but there was like today there was a news that developer of Tornado Cash was found guilty for money laundering. So and I guess like the question for Web3 people is learned, like you just don't launch things like Tornado Cash, right? And you won't have problems. But my question is, do you guys have insight how should like L1s perceive this news? Are they like, do they have to have like some additional cautiousness towards this? Like if I launch such a thing on an L1, would L1 have troubles with regulators? Because we know, although it's permissionless technology, but like many L1s are run by, people who who are behind it. Like, you know, foundations, they're not necessarily like private companies, but there's like a private company that does all the work. So, yeah, that's the question, I guess, if you have any insight.
Yeah, and I think that's a very controversial topic. I would reference that to like Ross Ulbricht, right, the creator of the Silk Road, where the creator of the Silk Road, you know, he's also in prison for allowing illicit activity happening on a platform that he created. So again, I think it's a very controversial topic. From a foundational level, though, when we're speaking to sort of like heads of security, heads of compliance at foundations or like teams like Coreum, what we're trying to really bring is a level of maturity of, at the very least, education, right? Understand that sort of XY activity can happen. How do you create deterrence from maybe not creating these systems, right? And if you are creating the systems, what is the best path forward of creating it in such a way where you can still stay under the regulatory framework of where you're providing these services? You know, what I've been seeing recently of projects that are trying to stay away from that gray area, they're like doing like IP blocking, right, for geolocation. So let's not allow you as consumers to use this product until we can get some clarity. You know, let's launch it in X jurisdiction where there isn't sort of this gray area, where I can maybe more freely allow for this product or service to exist. So that's sort of like, these are very tough conversations that we're still having, which I wouldn't necessarily be able to give you an answer of how to go upon it, but more so like, let's have this be an open discussion of how we can best launch X service with the idea that, you know, we're launching it for good rather than, you know, to allow for illicit activity to flow through it.
So speaking that you've come from an L1 background, sorry if I'm interrupting your response, but I'm actually curious, is this something that you would recommend an L1, like for example, the IP blocking, would you recommend baking that into the L1 so that nodes by default, when they spin up a node, are automatically blocking by IP address any traffic that might be deemed invalid or illicit in that region? Is that something that's even been talked about, proposed at the L1 layer, which is kind of the world that you're in, Favio?
That's a really good point. I think I should bring it up. But from an L1 like foundational perspective, that's why we're bringing companies like Anchain to help us first analyze the permissionless traffic, right? And at the same time, with the grantees that we have and the teams that we work with, we definitely make sure that the product is not infringing to any current regulatory frameworks that are out there. And we also try to allocate certain part of the grants for them to get legal advice.
If I don't take money like as a grant from your foundation, will I be able to launch something on your chain permissionlessly?
That's why. That's why I mentioned that protocols like Anchain, they monitor the permissionless traffic, and to your point with the Tornado Cache, I'm like not really familiar, but it's definitely like if you're a developer and you build something and someone else used it, and it fell into like fraudulent activity, is it really the developer's fault, right? But what we're trying to do is prevent that situation.
Cool. Any other questions for anyone?
I saw one in the front.
You mentioned two different standards, MiCA and the ISO, which I didn't get what the number was. Are these complementing each other, or whom they apply to? What is the differences, as far as you can tell?
For sure. So ISO 222 is kind of like the next iteration of SWIFT. It's a payments I wouldn't say it's a cross-border payments. It's just a payment standard that every single financial institution has to integrate by 2025. It's not a blockchain standard by any means. It's already something new that banks are integrating into their workflows, into their system, into their messaging, and they use third parties. Even Swift has a tool for this to validate that the message is compatible. So what we did is, why don't, instead of like like bank-to-bank communication being the way that it is right now, which is through, wire transfers, which can be slow, costly. Why don't we put that on the blockchain, but at the same time, you can be compatible with that standard,
So it's
right?
compatibility, a messaging compatibility standard between financial, in a way, protocols or entities, whether it be a blockchain or a bank.
Yes, and
Got it.
I think a clear example, and I'm not super familiar with this, but I think was Signature Bank launched a product back in 2018 called Signet,
Mhm.
which maybe you're familiar, Paul, but
I've heard of it, but I don't know the protocol.
what I'm trying to say is it is feasible to have this like almost zero nominal fees, instant settlements from bank to bank or from bank to institution or institution to institution. So the ISO 222 is mainly for banks, but then there are fintechs in the space that are also adhering to this in this whole compliance-friendly movement that we are part of. Yeah.
Okay, cool. I think we could wrap that up and actually head into our lightning round. Maybe you want to give a quick description, and if anything, let's do a quick ending on maybe how people can get in contact with you guys. So before we head into the lightning round,
Yep,
any quick
Yeah, so if
last
you're
minute
a
thoughts.
developer, if you're building any sort of product or service that deals with digital assets, we would love to talk to you, share more around how to build a proper sort of compliance framework if you don't have one already, and if you do, how can you sort of enhance that? And you can find us at Anchain.ai. .ai is sort of the web address there.
Yeah, for context, we just started working with Anchain, so I think in the future, this talks helps, even for me to learn. And I would say, if you want to learn more about Coreum, just go to Coreum.com. You can check out the latest projects that have been deployed on the chain, the latest grantees, the latest features, why we call ourselves an enterprise-grade blockchain. It's not just a buzzword. It comes with the ISO 222. It comes with smart tokens, which is our flagship development to tokenize in a lightweight manner that doesn't require you to deploy a smart contract for any use case. So it's more like we found a way to put the business logic on the token implementation. That's smart tokens in a nutshell. So yep, Coreum.com, and if you do have a project, talk to us. We are always open for partnerships, or like I said, we have a grants program, and yeah, that's it.
Cool. Thanks so much, guys. Appreciate it. Thanks for coming out. And I'll take it away for lightning round.
Right. Yeah. So, you guys are welcome to stay or not, but basically, we're gonna do a quick lightning round, which is giving everybody a chance to say what they're working on. If maybe you have your own meetup group, or you are hiring, or you're looking for a job, come line up at the side of the stage. We'll give you 60 seconds-ish to
Exactly.
pitch
no more.
your thing. And yeah, I have a quick little pitch, not really, kind of. So I'll go first, and then if anyone wants to line up, you can. If not, we'll do the giveaway. Yeah, I just wanted to mention that every Monday morning, there's a tech coffee downstairs at Portal Coffee. Paul's normally there chilling. It starts at 9 a.m. 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. It's just people in the tech space getting together. It's not only crypto, but we're down there. You can use code EDGE for 10% off your coffee as well. So that's pretty cool. And then there's another tech gathering next week, SoCal TechCon. And Paul, where's that taking place?
In Mission Valley, I don't know the exact venue, but look up SoCal TechCon or Startup SD, which is Startup San Diego. They're another startup-friendly organization in San Diego, and they have a link to SoCal TechCon or TechCon SoCal.
Yep.
So it's just a one-day event conference, usually connecting founders and investors. I think there's investors from all over the country coming down and giving talks and networking.
Cool.
Small event, so it's good, intimate.
Yep. Does anyone want to do a lightning round? All right.
Well, it's easy.
Cool. There's also a newsletter called Social Coyote, and he.
Wow. I'm gonna get off the stage. I'll let you take the stage.
Okay, cool. And he posts about. It's like a weekly newsletter, and he tells people what events are taking place. So anyway, we're gonna do a quick giveaway. I have 3 items. over here. And okay, first question. I'm going to see if anyone's actually listening to me at the beginning. Does anyone remember when the next when the next meetup is here? It's a dev meetup. It's called DevX. May 26th. Yes. Okay. There was 2 wallets that exited the US. What? Wasabi and oh wait. Was that it? Yep. Wasabi is one. What was the other one? Not Samurai. It's a bird. Comes from the ashes. Wasabi or Phoenix and Wasabi. Okay. And then this person's going to be getting $5 in Bitcoin. Okay, so the ISO 222 will need to be implemented by what year? Sorry, I went with him because he saw his hand first. 2025. Awesome. Cool. Well, yeah, that was all we have for tonight. See you guys next time. Thank you all for coming. And yeah. Also, shout out to Andrew. He's our volunteer, and he kills it over here on audio visual.